Activity 51 is in some ways the climax of this course. Let me just step back and show you the board and remind you what I've suggested is maybe the central feature of the American system of government. I've suggested that one thing that the American system of government is extremely good at is making sure that government doesn't kill or otherwise harm us, so that we're secure from our own government. So the vision of the founders was that definitely there is this evil side of government that you have to be careful about, and they established, and partly we inherited these safeguards against being harmed by government. One of them that we studied was self-government, and by having input into the laws, that is one way that we keep our government from harming us. And so that is a kind of barrier that keeps us safe. We've also talked about constitutions and how constitutions put limits on government and keep government from harming us. We also talked about independence as something that keeps us safe from government. We're not subject to the people of another country who don't really have our best interests at heart. Also, in more recent activities, we talked about religion as a safeguard, that if the people who hold political power are God-fearing and they believe that God will punish those who harm others, then they will be less likely to harm citizens with the power of government. So these are a number of the barriers that are set up in our system that keep us safe, and that was the understanding of the founding fathers. Now, Activity 51, I'm adding a few other features to this so you can see the full extent of these barriers and protections against government. In letter A, the focus is on freedom of the press, and I've chosen David Hume. I could choose other quotations to make this point, but Hume's understanding of freedom of the press is that it's apprehended that arbitrary power, meaning despotic power of government, would steal in upon us were we not careful to prevent its progress, and were there not an easy method of conveying the alarm from one end of the kingdom to the other. That's what the press, freedom of the press, is for. It's so that there is an easy way in the hands of the citizens. If this government, the evil side of government, starts breaking loose from its limits and starts a path toward despotism and tyranny, or begins harming the people, then the people have a way to communicate with one another to prevent that from happening, so that people can rise up against their government that is becoming despotic. Hume goes on to say, the spirit of the people must frequently be roused in order to curb the ambition of the court, or in our context, of the federal government. Now, this is assuming that the press, the media, cares about liberty and will speak out against the federal government if it should go beyond its limits, if it should become potentially harmful to the people. Liberty of the press is very effective in this area, says Hume. So, I think this is the best, the most correct way of understanding freedom of the press, freedom of speech of press. It's understood in a lot of different ways now, even going so far as the right of a woman to dance naked in a gentleman's club is supposedly protected by freedom of the press, freedom of speech. This I would suggest is not what the founders fought for. They fought for freedom of the press so that we could prevent tyranny. That's what that amendment is doing in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. When it says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, it was to prevent the federal government from becoming a tyranny. That's the point of all of the Bill of Rights. So we could add another barrier here and call it freedom of the press. So that would be an additional barrier against tyranny in our system. Checks and balances. we've looked at before somewhat, but this is again Madison saying that you need controls on government, such as checks and balances, where one part of the federal government can stand in the way of another to prevent the federal government from doing something tyrannical and harming the people. That would be another barrier to put up here, checks and balances. The letter C, speaking of the right to keep and bear arms, a very controversial amendment. I think when you read what the founders said about the Second Amendment, it's not controversial at all. It's very clear what its purpose is. You can see this in Joseph's story, just to select one quotation, letter C. The right of the citizens to keep and bear arms has justly been considered as the palladium of the liberties of a republic. What is a palladium? It's a safeguard. You'll see throughout the writings of the founders discussions of palladiums, bulwarks, all these words that mean limits or something that provides safety against something. So the right to keep and bear arms is the palladium of the liberties of a republic. Why? Because in other words, it's the right that keeps all the other rights secure. Why is that? Because if the people are armed, then they can fight back against the federal government. For there to be a free people, the people must be armed. And the federal government cannot prevent the people from being armed, or else we would be defenseless against the federal government. As he goes on to say, his words are, it offers a strong moral check against the usurpation and arbitrary power of rulers. It prevents tyranny. Even if in the first instance the federal government is successful in its expansion of power, tyrannical power, it enables the people to resist and triumph over them. If the people are armed, they'll always be stronger than the federal government, just in terms of sheer numbers of people. That's the meaning of the Second Amendment, as it was understood by those who put it there. You may not like guns. You may not want the people to be armed, but I think it's really important to keep in mind what that amendment is there for, and it makes perfect sense. We're going to put the right to keep and bear arms also here as one of these things that keeps the federal government from killing us. That was the concern of the founders, and that is what that amendment